At 7:23 local time, on March 20th, 2026, somewhere near the village of Nadivka, in the Pokrovsk sector of Donetsk Oblast, a Ukrainian drone operator from the Baltika crew adjusts his goggles and watches his monitor resolve into a scene that would have been science fiction 5 years ago. Two dark shapes are moving low and fast across the grey landscape. Ka-52 Alligators, Russia's most advanced attack helicopters, loaded with S-8 rocket pods, burning across contested airspace roughly 6 kilometers from the front line. To the naked eye, they look invincible. Armored cockpits, self-sealing fuel tanks, coaxial rotors that let them knife through crosswinds that would spin a conventional helicopter into the dirt. Each one costs somewhere between $16 and $25 million, depending on which Russian procurement spreadsheet you believe. And right now, they're being watched by a machine that costs about €950. The operator's fiber optic FPV drone, a General Chereshnya Optics, 13-inch frame, 25 kilometers of spool, is already airborne. It doesn't emit radio waves. It doesn't broadcast a control signal that Russian electronic warfare can detect, lock, or jam. Thin as a human hair, the fiber optic cable trails behind it like a translucent fishing line, carrying uncompressed video and control data at 1.5 gigabits per second through glass. As far as Russian EW systems are concerned, this thing is a ghost. No electromagnetic signature, no frequency to spoof, no signal to drown. Just physics, quietly doing its job. Before we get into what happens next, let's talk about what a Ka-52 actually is and why one of them being swatted out of the sky by a hobby-sized quadcopter matters. The Kamov Ka-52 Alligator is Russia's frontline attack helicopter. Two-seat, day and night capable, armored against 23mm rounds across its vital components, and armed with a 30mm autocannon, Vika anti-tank missiles, and those unguided S-8 rockets that will become very relevant in a moment. Its coaxial rotor design, two counter-rotating blades stacked on top of each other, no tail rotor, makes it more compact and more maneuverable at low altitude than most Western equivalents. Russia started the full-scale invasion with around 90 of them. According to Oryx, they've lost more than 60 since 2022. That math is not trending in Moscow's favor. Now, what was a Ka-52 doing 6 kilometers from the Ukrainian front line in 2026? Good question. Russian mil bloggers have been asking the same thing, and their answers are not flattering to their own command. The tactic these helicopters were running is called a climb launch. The helicopter pitches its nose up, gains altitude rapidly, and salvos unguided S-8 rockets in the general direction of Ukrainian positions before diving back toward the deck. Airborne artillery. It was already considered ineffective back in 2022. The accuracy of unguided rockets launched from a ballistic climb at several kilometers distance is charitable to call area suppression. In 2026, with drone swarms, precision-guided munitions, and entrenched infantry in reinforced basements, lobbing firecrackers from the sky is not what you want your $16 million helicopter doing. But nobody asked the Baltika crew for their opinion on Russian tactical planning. They had a different contribution in mind. The Baltika operator belongs to the Predators of Heights, Hrzaki Vysot in Ukrainian, an unmanned systems battalion within the 59th Separate Assault Brigade, part of Ukraine's rapidly expanding unmanned systems forces under the command of Robert Magyar Brovdi. They've already shot down a Russian Mi-8 helicopter with an FPV drone back in September 2025. They know the flight corridors, they know the timing, and since late December 2025, they've had access to the General Chereshnya Optics, a fiber optic FPV platform that was purpose-built for exactly the electronic warfare nightmare that the Pokrovsk sector has become. The Optics was officially certified for military use in late December 2025. By March, it was hunting helicopters. 90 days from paperwork to history, a timeline that would make a NATO procurement officer faint. The Optics comes in 3 frame sizes, 10, 13, and 15 inches, with fiber optic spool options ranging from 15 to 35 kilometers. The fiber optic link is the whole point. In a battle space where Russian EW systems like the Pol-21 and various field-deployed jammers blanket every radio frequency that a standard FPV drone might use, the optics doesn't care. Its control signal travels through glass, not air. You can jam radio waves. You can spoof GPS. You cannot jam a physical cable carrying light. It's like trying to hack a letter by shouting at the mailman. The trade-off is weight and maneuverability. The spool adds mass. The cable can snag on obstacles, and you leave a physical trail after every flight that means you need to relocate. But when the alternative is sending your drone into a wall of electronic noise and watching it spiral into a field, those trade-offs start looking very acceptable. So here's what happened to that Ka-52.
At 7:24, the Baltica crew has both helicopters on screen. The lead Ka-52 is pulling ahead, accelerating northwest. The operator pushes his stick forward and begins closing on it. The spool counter on his relay box reads 18.4 kilometers of cable deployed. He has 6.6 kilometers of fiber left before the drone becomes a very expensive kite. At the closure rate he's managing, roughly 140 kilometers per hour, against the target pulling away at 260, the math is brutal. The lead helicopter is gaining separation faster than the drone can close. At 7:25, the operator watches it bank and accelerate beyond reach. 18 kilometers of glass thread trail behind his drone across the Ukrainian steppe, and the first target is gone. But then the second Ka-52 does something that saves the mission and dooms its crew. Instead of following the leader northwest, the wingman banks south. It's lower, maybe 80 meters above the deck, and slower, decelerating through what looks like the setup for a climb-launch rocket run. The deceleration changes the intercept geometry entirely. The operator's spool reads 19.1 kilometers deployed. He has 5.9 kilometers of cable remaining. The helicopter is roughly 4 kilometers away, and the gap is closing. For the first time in this engagement, the numbers work. Barely. At 7:26, the operator begins the intercept run. His drone is pushing 145 kilometers per hour. The Ka-52 is now at roughly 220 and still decelerating as it sets up for its rocket salvo. Closure rate, somewhere around 110 kilometers per hour. Time to intercept, approximately 2 minutes. 2 minutes where everything has to go right.
The first problem hits at 7:26 and 40 seconds. Wind. A crosswind gust at the drone's altitude, maybe 15 to 20 knots, catches the fiber optic cable broadside. 20 plus kilometers of glass thread strung across open steppe acts like a sail. The drone's flight controller registers lateral drag that shouldn't be there and begins compensating, burning battery to maintain its heading. The operator watches his power indicator drop from 64% to 61% in a span of seconds that feels entirely too fast. He does the math in his head. At current drain, he has roughly 7 minutes of flight time. He needs at least 2 to close, plus maneuvering reserve for the terminal approach. The margins just got thinner. At 7:27, the second problem. The Ka-52's nose begins to pitch up. It's starting its climb launch. If the helicopter completes its rocket salvo and dives back toward the deck, it will accelerate through 280 kilometers per hour, heading northwest, and the drone will never catch it. The operator has maybe 45 seconds before the helicopter enters its climb. And once those S-8 rockets are away, the pilot will slam the stick forward and run. The engagement window isn't 2 minutes anymore. It's less than 1. He pushes the throttle to maximum. The drone accelerates to 155 kilometers per hour, the frame shaking as the 13-inch props bite into cold morning air. Battery drain increases. The spool counter spins. 20.3 kilometers of cable deployed, 4.7 kilometers remaining. The fiber is paying out faster than planned because the crosswind is pushing the drone off its direct line, forcing a longer path. Every meter of lateral drift is a meter of cable he can't afford to waste. The operator sees something on his feed that makes his stomach drop. A third aircraft, partially obscured by ground haze. What looks like a Russian Mi-8 transport moving along a parallel track roughly 2 kilometers east. If that Mi-8's crew spots his drone visually, or if a door gunner happens to be scanning in the right direction, the element of surprise evaporates. An FPV drone at 155 kilometers per hour is small, but it's not invisible, not at close range, not against a crew that knows what to look for. He can't do anything about it. He holds course. The Ka-52 is halfway through its pitch up. The nose is climbing through maybe 15 degrees. The operator can see the S8 rocket pods clearly now, mounted on the stubby weapons pylons alongside an external fuel tank. The thermal shimmer from the twin VK2500 turboshaft engines is visible on the camera feed. Twin heat signatures pushing out 2,400 horsepower each. The helicopter is enormous in his display, and it has no idea what's coming. But the cable has other plans. The spool tension spikes. Something, a power line, a tree, a fence post, has snagged the fiber somewhere along the 20+ kilometers trailing behind the drone. The operator feels the drone lurch backward as the cable goes taut. His forward speed drops from 155 to 130 in less than a second. The spool counter freezes at 21.1 kilometers deployed. The drone is pulling against its own leash. He has maybe 3.9 kilometers of cable still on the spool, but it doesn't matter if the line behind him is caught on something. The tension threatens to either snap the cable, ending the mission instantly, or drag the drone backward until it stalls. Ukrainian operators have trained for this. The standard procedure is to reduce speed, allow slack to form, and hope the obstacle releases. But standard procedure assumes you're not in the middle of intercepting an attack helicopter that's about to disappear.
The operator makes the call. He maintains maximum throttle and accepts the tension. The fiber optic cable is rated for a certain pull force. He doesn't know the exact number and doesn't have time to look it up. Either the obstacle releases, the cable holds, or the glass thread snaps, and a €900 drone becomes a ballistic projectile with no guidance. Option 3 would actually still be headed in the right direction, which is either comforting or terrifying, depending on your perspective. The tension releases. The cable pulls free. Forward speed jumps back to 150 as the drone surges forward. Whatever snagged the line, some piece of Ukrainian infrastructure that just made its contribution to the war effort has let go. Spool counter reads 21.4 kilometers, 3.6 remaining. Battery, 52%. The Ka-52 is now in a steep climb, nose up through 25 degrees, S8 rocket pods tilting skyward. The operator can see the rocket exhaust ports on the pods. In seconds, the helicopter will fire its salvo and begin its escape dive. The drone is closing fast, now inside 2 kilometers, but 2 kilometers at a combined closure rate that's dropping as the helicopter gains altitude. Here's the geometry problem that makes this borderline impossible. An FPV drone tops out at maybe 155 kilometers per hour in level flight. A Ka-52 cruises at 250 to 260. This isn't a tail chase. You don't run down a helicopter from behind. This is a converging intercept on a target that's accelerating upward. The operator has to predict the helicopter's flight path, maintain closure on a 3-dimensional vector, and hit a specific vulnerability point on an aircraft that's armored against 23mm cannon rounds, all while managing a physical cable that just tried to kill the mission 10 seconds ago. The margins for error aren't thin, they're theoretical.
7:28 and 5 seconds. The first S8 rocket fires, then the second, then a rippling salvo as the Ka-52 dumps its load toward Ukrainian positions several kilometers to the west. The rockets trail white smoke as they arc across the grey sky. Unguided munitions heading toward positions where Ukrainian soldiers are sheltering in reinforced basements, where even a direct hit probably wouldn't cause significant casualties. $16 million of helicopter, lobbing firecrackers. But the operator isn't watching the rockets. He's watching the helicopter's nose begin to drop. It's starting its escape dive. He has seconds. The drone is inside 800 meters. The Ka-52 fills the camera feed. The operator can distinguish individual rivets on the weapon's pylon. He can see the external fuel tank slung beneath the stub wing, swollen with jet fuel. He can see the faint glow from the engine exhausts. Battery, 47%. Cable, 22.1 kilometers deployed. The helicopter's nose is dropping fast. It's entering the escape dive.
airspeed climbing. In 3 seconds, the speed differential will become unclosable. The operator tilts his stick and commits to the terminal run. At a closure rate that his brain registers only as very fast, the drone covers the final distance in a blur. The camera feed becomes a smear of grey sky and dark metal as the operator fights to hold the aim point on the weapon's pylon, right where the S8 pods and external fuel hang beneath the stub wing. Whether he was specifically trained to target this vulnerability, or whether it was simply the most accessible impact point on the approach angle, the result is the same. 7:28 and 18 seconds. Impact. The shaped charge warhead detonates against the Ka-52's weapons pylon area. The helicopter doesn't disintegrate in midair. Ka-52s don't do that. They're built like flying tanks and armored accordingly. But armored against cannon rounds is not the same as invulnerable to a focused explosive jet punching through at thousands of meters per second. The damage is immediately catastrophic to the aircraft's ability to fly. Hydraulic lines servicing the stub wing and weapons pylons rupture. The external fuel tank, the one hanging right at the impact point, begins hemorrhaging jet fuel into the slipstream. Whether structural failure, control loss, or fire reach the cockpit first, the Ka-52 enters an emergency descent that looks nothing like a controlled auto-rotation. What follows is not a clean landing. The helicopter comes down hard, several hundred meters along its flight path from the initial point of impact. It crashes and begins burning, and the crew, Captain Timur Gimranov, born 1999, and Navigator Lieutenant Ilya Kujuyev, born 1997, both from the 17th Army Aviation Brigade of the Central Military District, managed to exit the wreck. They move several hundred meters and take cover in a trench near some burned-out armor. This is where the 2nd Ukrainian unit enters the picture. And for the Russian crew, the situation goes from catastrophic to terminal. Drones from the 1st Battalion of the 414th Separate Brigade, Birds of Magyar, were already orbiting the crash site, not because they were scrambled in response, because they were already there, positioned in advance, waiting, part of the same coordinated operation that put the Baltica crew's optics in the air. The follow-up drones are standard radio-linked FPV, no fiber optic cables, shorter range, but more than sufficient for hunting 2 men in a trench a few hundred meters from a burning helicopter. The crew's survival instinct carried them out of the wreck and into that trench. Their training told them to find cover and wait for extraction.
Закат, слышу птицу! Наша птица!
Есть, увидел.
But there would be no extraction. Not here. Not 6 kilometers from the Ukrainian front line, with the smoke column from their own helicopter marking their position like a signal flare. The Birds of Magyar found them. The follow-up strikes were precise. Both crew members were confirmed killed. The entire sequence, from initial intercept to final confirmation, was recorded and later released by USF Commander Brovdi. A fiber optic drone costing under €1,000 engaged a $16 million helicopter in flight, forced it down, and then a second drone element hunted the surviving crew on the ground. The Ka-52 carried armor. It carried electronic warfare capability. It carried a 30mm cannon that could theoretically engage aerial targets. None of it mattered. The drone was invisible to sensors, immune to jamming, and guided by a human operator watching through a glass thread from 20+ kilometers away, fighting cable snags and crosswinds and battery drain while threading an intercept against a target moving nearly twice his speed. If that had been the end of the story, it would already be one of the most significant single drone engagements of the entire war. But it wasn't the end. Within roughly 24 hours, Russian sources confirmed a second Kr-52 had been lost. The Mil blogger Fighter Bomber, widely believed to be Captain Ilya Tumanov, a serving Russian military officer, posted that it was a rough morning. One crew member was reportedly killed on impact. And the fighter bomber channel itself lets slip a detail that tells you everything you need to know about the Russian military's current helicopter problem. Infantry-grade EW jammers that could theoretically be mounted on helicopters to protect them from drones have electromagnetic compatibility issues with the helicopter's own avionics. Bolting a jammer to a Ka-52 might save it from a €900 quadcopter while simultaneously frying every screen in the cockpit. That's not a solution. That's choosing your flavor of catastrophe. Other Russian channels were less diplomatic. Rebar, one of the most widely followed Russian military mapping projects, pointed out that these helicopters were carrying nothing but unguided S-8 rocket pods. In 2026, against entrenched infantry in reinforced basements, even a direct hit from an S-8 on the exact position where Ukrainian soldiers are sheltering probably wouldn't cause significant casualties. And the accuracy of rockets launched from a ballistic climb makes a direct hit more fantasy than planning assumption. Multiple Russian analysts argued the Ka-52 has far better uses, specifically hunting Ukrainian long-range drones, where the helicopter's speed, sensors, and cannon are actually effective. Sending them to lob unguided rockets inside the envelope of Ukrainian FPV drones was described in language that would get bleeped on YouTube.
And it wasn't just the frontline bleeding helicopters. Rewind to February 20th, 2026, exactly 1 month before the Nadivka shootdown, and Ukrainian strike drones hit the Pugachevka airfield in Russia's Oryol region, 350 kilometers from the front. The target was a small dirt strip belonging to a local Dosaf Aero Club that Russian forces had been using as a forward operating base. On the evening of February 20th, Ukrainian drones found a Ka-52 and an Mi-8 sitting on that airfield like $16 million worth of lawn ornaments and destroyed both. Board number 18, Ka-52, 16th Army Aviation Brigade from Zernograd. Board number 53, Mi-8, 319th Independent Helicopter Regiment from Russia's Far East. Both unrecoverable. Helicopters aren't safe when they're flying. They aren't safe when they're parked. The threat envelope has expanded in both directions simultaneously. The Ka-52 is not some disposable asset. Russia started with around 90. Production rates are classified, but open source analysts estimate they're building somewhere in the low single digits per year. That's not enough to keep pace with attrition, let alone build back lost capacity. Each one lost represents not just $16 million in hardware, but years of crew training, irreplaceable institutional knowledge, and a gap in capability that Russian industry cannot close. And the thing killing them costs less than a decent used car. The fiber optic FPV revolution hasn't just made the front line more lethal for helicopters. It's created a new category of air denial that operates below the threshold of traditional air defense. You don't need a Stinger launcher or a Gepard anti-aircraft gun. You need a trained operator, a Starlink terminal, and a drone with a spool of glass thread and a shaped charge warhead. The cost exchange ratio is so obscenely lopsided, it makes the fuel train strikes look modest. €950 versus $16 million. That's a ratio that would make a hedge fund manager weep with envy.
There's a moment in every conflict where a piece of technology crosses a threshold from novelty to inevitability. FPV drones crossed that threshold against ground vehicles in 2023. They crossed it against fortifications and infantry in 2024. And on March 20th, 2026, near a nondescript village in Donetsk Oblast, a drone operator fighting cable tension, crosswind drag, and battery drain threaded an intercept through a closing window of seconds and crossed it against attack helicopters. The General Chereshnya company didn't exist before this war. The optics platform went from certification to historic combat employment in 90 days. Behind that timeline, volunteer donations, crowdfunded thermal optics, a defense tech startup ecosystem, and frontline engineers who compressed a development cycle that would take a NATO procurement office the better part of a decade into 3 months. A $16 million helicopter didn't lose to a €900 drone. It lost to an entire ecosystem of people who refused to accept that the sky belonged to the other side. 2 Ka-52s in 24 hours. A third destroyed at an airfield a month earlier. Russian milbloggers openly calling their own command's tactics reckless and pointless. And somewhere in the Pokrovsk sector, a Ukrainian drone crew is rewinding the spool, charging the batteries, and watching the sky for the next one. It's a bad stretch for Russian helicopters, and it's about to get worse. Bye for now.